So I'm going to tell you, just to start, most owners, right away, they think they need another salesperson. Like, that is the one thing that they're thinking that's going to solve all their problems. I get another salesperson, I get more sales, I increase revenue, no problem. Here's the thing, they only get one shot at this. If they hire wrong, it's actually going to cost them a lot more in the long run, because it costs them a year, it costs them time, it costs them training. It's about $100,000, give or take. So they conclude in the end that, a general manager or an operations manager is just not what I need. It doesn't work in this company. It's not for my style of operation. And then before you know it, they're just kind of back to the same bottleneck that they've had. So they actually need someone running a business. They need somebody who's going to manage their KPIs. So if you're still approving vacations, discounts, pricing, hiring decisions, and just solving everyone's problems, then you're actually not running a business. You are managing the day-to-day operation of your business, and that's sitting on your shoulders. So what we're going to be focusing on specifically today in this video, we're going to try to understand when it is you're ready to make that hire. What is it that you should be paying? What you should be measuring? Like, what should their KPIs actually be? What you should pay them, and 4 mistakes that you could make when you hire them that can actually screw that up for you and destroy the hire. So first thing I want to really talk about is whether or not you're ready. So there's usually pretty good reasons to hire someone, and there's usually pretty bad reasons to hire someone. Now, the thing is, when we hire out of necessity, that automatically puts us in a framework and puts us in a position where we're going to make the wrong hire. So if you're burnt out because you're exhausted, you're burning the midnight oil, you're coming in early, you're leaving late, you're just physically done, that's usually not a good reason to hire someone, because again, you're operating out of need and your clarity is going to be skewed. You're not going to be able to evaluate the candidate properly. And some of the mistakes that people make is they just have someone in front of them. They ask them a couple of interview questions and they're like, you know what? You sound pretty good. I need this right now. And the worst position that you ever want to be in when you're hiring someone, especially that they're going to manage the operation of your business, is you never want them to be in a position where you need them more than they need you. Another thing is if you're feeling totally overwhelmed. I hear this all the time. Clients come to me and they're like, hey man, I'm totally overwhelmed. I don't even know where to go. I need some help. I need some support. Here's the thing. When you're overwhelmed, the solution to that is clarity. And the solution to clarity is understanding your prioritization. Are you prioritizing things that are just not essential? And are you not delegating effectively? Chances are, unless you're a total solopreneur and you're operating, at a high level, at the $5 million revenue level, there's going to be people that you can delegate to. Now, here's the thing. If you don't trust them, you'll never delegate to them. So you're paying a salary for someone that you ultimately don't trust. Just something to think about. If you're working too many hours, your spouse says that they absolutely need your help and you're never around, or revenue is slowing. These are things that we're always going to want to consider. And those things actually probably are good indicators that you have fundamental issues and clarity and structural issues in your business. But that's not necessarily the indicator that you need to hire. So here's some indicators that you probably should rely on. First of all, revenue, anywhere between 3 and 8 million in revenue. You also want to make sure that you have predictable cash flow. That's something that's really important. Making sure that you have 6 months salary worth in the bank just in case something happens. The last thing you'd ever want to do, and remember, we're dealing with people, we're focusing on a workplace culture, and so we never want to be like, you know what, I have enough cash flow, I'm going to hire someone today, but next month, if sales kind of tank, then you're like, hey man, sorry, I can't keep you on anymore because, our cash flow is not great, because you're also messing with other people's lives. And the type of companies that I work with have a solid workplace culture where it's not a revolving door. That also impacts, by the way, your valuation of your company. So if you have people coming in and out all the time, your valuation is going to take a tank just because you don't have consistency around the people that are there. On a team side, you're probably sitting at around 12 to 30 employees, give or take. You probably have multiple departments or different things that are kind of coordinating together. And you find out that all those department heads, they're all reporting up to you. And you're the one that's really calling those decisions. And if you have a system, for example, where you have people reporting to people, especially if that people is you, if you're constantly the one being reported to, then that's also going to be a reason why you're going to want to consider hiring a general manager or an operations manager. And by the way, I use those two terms just, for variation, but essentially depending on the industry that you're in, you might either go with a general manager or you might go with an operations manager. It all depends on your specific industry. Now, in terms of the operations, there are a few things that actually have to exist in place. You need to have your SOPs. You need to have your KPIs. You need to have weekly proper meetings with your entire team, and not like those types of meetings where it's like, hey, nothing to report. Great. I'm going to give you back 30 minutes of your day. You're going to have a solid agenda that you're going to be working from, where you're going to be meeting every single one of your team members every single week and holding them accountable so that eventually when an operations manager, general manager steps into that role, they're going to be the ones that are responsible for that meeting, and they're going to be reporting up to you. The next thing is that your business has to be able to survive vacation. So if everything is chaos because you go on vacation and the entire business shuts down, either because you are the top salesperson in the business or because just things don't go right, then that's an opportunity that you're missing right over there. So now I want you to ask yourself, give yourself 5 things to think about. What are 5 decisions that you make every single week? For example, can I discount this? Should I hire this person? Should I fire this person? Can we order this? Are we low on supplies? Just some of these issues that keep coming up, whether they're client issues, retention issues, vacation approvals, things like that. If there are 5 of these items that keep coming back to your desk on repeat, that's usually a pretty good indicator that it's time for you to make that hire. You're becoming the bottleneck in the organization, and so scalability becomes really difficult because if every single discount, every single client issue, every single install, for example, or every single delivery has to go through you, then you're the person that the entire company relies on. So we need to actually eliminate that bottleneck and make sure that there is a proper hierarchy so that those elements are clearly, number one, documented in SOPs, that you have a proper foundation which models your vision for your company so that your clients actually feel that every single person in the organization emanates the culture and emanates the standards that you are trying to go for in the company. So the biggest misconception, I would say, is GMs don't actually create systems. Operations manager don't create systems. They actually run existing systems and they make sure that they run effectively. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you have an SOP or you have systems in place, it doesn't necessarily mean that your operations manager isn't going to want to come in, diagnose and determine what is going right, what is going wrong, and make some tweaks and adjustments. That's totally normal. But if you have a company where you have no SOPs, you have no standards, every single one of your sales reps goes through a completely different process, whether it's a needs analysis or follow-up process or CRM use, whatever the case may be, then those are the things that you actually have to work on tightening before you can move forward and hire an operations manager. Okay, let's talk about payment. Let's talk about money, because that's a big thing. I want you to imagine a couple of things, and I want you to think about a couple of things. You have a really broad salary range. You could get someone who's going to manage your operations for $55,000, $65,000, and you could find somebody at $125,000, $135,000 a year. There's a couple of things that are going to come into play here. Number one, we want to look at your revenue, because based on your revenue, typically it'll dictate the size of your organization and how much is really involved in the management. Typically, larger organizations with a higher revenue base have operations managers that will be further qualified, so you won't be hiring a junior. The other thing is that the more that they have to take under their wing, for example, $1 million company, they really may need to revise a lot of those SOPs. But if they're coming into a $25 or $30 million revenue operation or more, then a lot of those things are going to be in place. And what they need to do is they just need to make sure that all that stuff is running smoothly. And that's what's going to make the operation really run as best as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the different salary gaps. And we're going to start at like $1 million, which is really baseline. If you're scaling a company, then what you're looking for is you're not really looking for a general manager or operations manager. You're actually looking for an operations lead. You're probably going to be paying them around $65,000 to $85,000. They don't hold a manager title. And we want to be careful about titles because that can create confusion. It can create issues and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what you're looking at is you're looking at somebody who's going to be anywhere between $65,000 and $85,000 a year. That's where it should be, plus bonus. We can look at bonus offers and we'll talk about bonus after. But essentially, they're going to be responsible for a large part of the setup and implementation. They're probably going to be juniors. Also, at $1 million, you're probably leaking a lot of profits, and that's why you're stuck at $1 million. That's why you're going to be looking at more of a junior operations manager and somebody that may see the potential of growing with your organization as you continue to grow and as you continue to evolve in terms of your sales and in terms of your profitability. The next range I would say is going to be between $3 and $5 million a year, where you're really going to be looking at an operations manager, someone that's going to run the operations side of the business. So there are, the way the business itself is going to function, they are going to implement themselves within that. So whether it's, client management, whether it's sales management, whether it's marketing management, they're going to make sure that everything really just functions properly within the systems that already exist. They're not developing new marketing campaigns for you. They're not sitting there and trying to figure out what's the best way to get new clients, what's the best way to market that. You've already figured that out at that point. So you have somebody at the $90,000 to $115,000 range, give or take. They're going to oversee and they're going to run the operation. And the next phase would be above $5 million, you'd be looking at a general manager. General manager is really going to report directly to you, and they're going to oversee the entire organization and the way the entire organization operates, from the client side, from the after sales side, to the delivery, to the project management, to the finance. They're going to look at everything to make sure that the company is running right. At the end of the day, the operations manager in a smaller company will take a lot of that decision power off your table. But what's going to happen is when you bring in a general manager, they're actually going to position themselves in a way where they may unseat you as the best salesperson in the company. Now, I certainly wouldn't want you to take that as a threat and think like, I'm going to hire someone and they're going to become better than I am and they're going to take over or go into competition. Don't go in with that scarcity mindset. Have an open mind, because there are so many different ways that you could position and you can structure a general manager where they can really, really support you. So a general manager above 5 million, you're looking at 110 to 150,000. Now, these are based on percentages based on your P&L, right? So we want to make sure that the salary component really does come out of your P&L as a small percentage, and that it's not, a huge expense. We're not looking at 60% of the P&L. Realistically, we're trying to make sure that we can keep salaries anywhere between 20 to 25%. Sometimes we stretch a little bit for the right candidate, but that's where we want to be for salaries based on revenues. Now, in terms of bonuses, I want to talk about bonus for a minute, because bonus is something that is really, really confused really, really often. So just because a company grows in revenue does not necessarily mean that they are growing in profit. Because if their cost of goods sold is going up and it's not managed, their expenses are out of control and they're not managed, then what happens is sometimes the more you grow in terms of revenue, the narrower the gap is actually going to get with respect to your net profit margins and even your gross profit margins. So those are things that you really want to look at. And so because of these factors, You never want to bonus your general manager or your operations manager based on revenue. Revenue grows, profit can shrink, it can have a real big impact, right? The whole goal here is so that your operation itself grows. But if you're running $1 million company, just as an example, your net profit at the end of the year is $150,000, and then you bring in a general manager at $60,000. If you have, if your profit shrinks by $60,000 plus benefits, then you're actually not helping yourself. The entire purpose of this is so that you could better have clarity, you can remove things off your plate, and you could better direct the company so that it grows along lines of the vision. So you can grow the revenue, you can manage the cost of goods sold, and you can manage the net profit margins as cleanly and as nicely as possible. So remember, they're not an expense, it really is an investment at that point. So couple things that we want to do with bonuses. So we want to tie them to a couple of things. We want to tie them to either your gross profit or your EBITDA, if that's something that you share in your weekly meetings. Maybe net profit. Maybe you have team retention or customer retention KPIs. Maybe it's about project completion. Every single organization is going to have their own way of determining how they're going to bonus their people. At the end of the day, cash flow can also be one of those metrics, because if a business is generating, a certain amount of cash flow, that is directly linked to their profitability, and an increase in profits by a certain percentage. And again, we track those and we create those metrics will entitle your operations manager, general manager to more of a greater bonus. You can also tie it to KPIs. So when KPIs are at a certain level, and I gotta be honest, KPI attainment is usually my favorite because it's the cleanest one and it's the clearest one. So KPIs can be attained in a lot of different ways. And what you can always do is you can set bonuses based on the number of KPIs that are hit, what percentage of the KPI was hit, et cetera, et cetera. So I just find that it's a little bit more data driven. It's also easier to measure. In terms of equity, I would say that's probably a no-no. People are going to ask for equity because they just don't understand how to design incentives, how to create incentives for themselves. Also, equity states, by the way, it could create complacency, and that's one of the things that we want to avoid as much as possible. So instead of that, you could use profit sharing as a model based on KPIs. You could do phantom shares, you could do long-term incentive bonuses, you could do performance bonuses. There's a lot of different ways to structure it, depending on the culture of your company and depending on how you really see that in alignment with your vision. And so each business owner is going to determine what's going to be the best model for them in terms of implementation. The end of the day, the philosophy here is that you want to pay them enough so that they're actually solving problems for you. Because if they're not solving problems, then they're not helping you. So one thing before we get to the scorecard, because I want to touch on the scorecard, the bonus structure only works if you know what your actual gross profit is. And most owners don't look at that at this level. It's not a weekly thing. So if you're not sure where your gross profits actually sit, the profit simulator is going to help you identify 12 basic areas where you could be scoring and see operational improvements. Link is below. Go have a look. Totally free, just for fun. All right, so let's move on to the scorecard. So here's the thing. Job descriptions are totally useless. They're great in concept to give people an idea of what they're supposed to be doing, but people actually manage numbers. They don't manage the tasks. And so what I'd rather actually see in a business is I'd rather see a business owner helping their general manager, helping their operations manager hit certain KPIs for them to be able to grow and for them to be able to really see the growth in the business. So 5 KPIs, just basic. And like I said, you could custom configure this based on what's important to you. But I would touch on revenue. I would touch on gross profit. I would touch on operating profit. I would touch on employee retention because that's a culture thing, right? If you notice that below your manager, you've got a revolving door, then you've got a culture problem, and that's often stemming from the leader. Another thing that we can also do is we can do NPS scores or customer satisfaction scores. So that's also, those are KPIs that you really want to watch. You could also look at on-time project completion or on-time delivery. You could look at gross margin. You could look at conversion. You could look at average turnaround time. There's so many different KPIs, but the most important thing that I want to mention about KPIs is that you can't track what you don't measure. So if you're not measuring it, you have two options. Number one, scrap the KPI, or option number two, create a system or mechanism to start being able to track that effectively. You're going to do a weekly review. Every single Monday, whatever's green, whatever's yellow, whatever's red, nothing else, no excuses, really on point, direct, 30 minutes, no more than that, just to be able to make sure that whatever issues are really arising, if there are decisions where you do need to involve yourself in, and again, they're not the decisions that are going to, repeat themselves on a regular basis. But if there are decisions that you do need to get involved in, then these are opportunities for you to be able to really go forward and help with that. So let's talk about and shift to what bringing them in is going to look like and what their first 90 days is going to look like. 90 days is like this probationary period, and you want to see how they're going to measure up, how they're going to function, how they're going to work. Days 1 to 30, it's literally observation. They're meeting the team. They're seeing the personalities. They're trying to figure out what fits. They're trying to understand your mission, vision, values. They're trying to understand what your customers are really looking for. They're going over the financials. They're going over the SOPs. They're going to meetings. Nothing really happened during days 1 to 30. Days 31 to 60, they're going to start taking ownership. So they're going to own maybe one department. Maybe it's going to be operations. Maybe it's going to be customer service. Maybe it's going to be sales support. Maybe it's going to be HR. Whatever creates the biggest piece of leverage, that's where they're going to focus on. In days 61 to 90, that's when they're really going to start owning the business rhythm. And then you should start seeing things really move off your plate at a much higher pace. So they're no longer walking, they're running. They're actually going to be responsible for running those leadership meetings. They're going to have their KPIs. They're going to know what they are. They'll be ready to report them for you. Make sure that they're on your desk or in your inbox or on a dashboard, however they're displayed. They're going to have accountability. They're going to have decision-making power. And the owner, yourself, you no longer have to attend every single meeting that exists in the company. So the hardest part as an owner is to stop answering questions. Remove yourself from that equation when staff are going to come to you. There's going to be like this trust period where they don't know if they can trust that they're going to get the right answer. So the best thing to do is to just redirect. Have you spoken to Sarah every single time? What did she say? What does she think? Really to try and empower that operations manager or general manager as much as possible so that they feel like they are in that decision-making capacity, and also that they feel that you have your trust and confidence, because if they're constantly undermined, that's going to be a challenge for them. So here's the thing. 4 reasons why it fails. Number 1, you promote your best salesperson. They have no operations background. They're a great salesperson. They're a terrible manager. They don't lift the people around them, and they just have a different skill set. Don't make that mistake. Number 2, you hire a friend. That's also super common. Hard conversations start disappearing, and it's really hard to hold them accountable. So they won't be accountable on a regular basis, and everything is going to start suffering as a consequence because excuses become just part of the daily dialogue. Number 3, if there's no authority and they're not responsible for results and they can't spend $500 and they can't hire and they can't fire and they have no, negotiation ability, the job is just impossible. You're not giving them the opportunity to be able to delegate and to be able to leverage you. And the last thing, if you won't let go. Second guessing, overriding when the employee comes to you and says, I don't know what to do here, and you give them an answer, and instead of saying, why don't you go ask Jim? Why don't you go ask Sarah? If you answer every question, you micromanage, eventually everyone winds up bypassing the GM or the ops man, and everything just winds up on your plate. It's just a failed experiment and lost money. So it's not about buying your freedom. It's about building a business that can make decisions without you. That's what we want to achieve here. So the day your business stops depending on you, the value starts going up because you become replaceable. And then the profit usually goes up. Your stress will also really go down. So what I want you to click on the link below, go into the profit simulator, do a couple things in there, see where your opportunities really are, leave any questions you have below, reach out to me directly, and subscribe if you're building a business I can't run without you. I'd be happy to help you.